I really like my Canon M50. It's budget friendly, it gives me great results, and for a long time I shot everything for this YouTube channel on my Canon M50. Until recently when I bought the Canon R5 that I'm gonna get rid of. Oh god, why? Why did I do that? But anyway, that's a whole other story. Now, just because I really like the Canon M50 doesn't mean that it's the best camera out there. The value you get from this camera is great, but let's be honest, it's an entry-level camera, a budget camera, so there are some limitations you might run into. For a lot of you guys, the M50 is the perfect camera. If you do photography and video as a hobby, and if you don't need weather sealing or 4K 120 or 50 megapixels, the M50, perfect. But I know that a lot of you are also more serious about filmmaking and photography. Not saying that if it's your hobby that you're not serious about it, but you know what I mean, right? So if it's more than just a hobby for you, or you want it to be more than just a hobby, then there are some things you should be aware of if you have a Canon M50 or if you're thinking about buying a Canon M50 or Canon M50 Mark II. And the Canon M50 Mark II will hopefully be even better than this one, but it will never be on the same level as more expensive cameras like the R5, for example. So first there's the EOS M system and the lens mount, because when you buy a camera, any camera, you also buy into a lens mount. In this case, the EF-M mount. All the lenses you'll buy have to fit that lens mount. Now, there's nothing wrong with the M system or the EF-M mount. The cameras are all small and light, and the lenses are small and light. That's great. But it's a separate camera lens ecosystem, and like I said, if you're more serious about photography and filmmaking, at some point you might want to upgrade to full frame. Now, that could be a problem, because if you want to stick with Canon mirrorless, you'll have to move to the Canon R system, and you can't use M lenses on the R system, and vice versa. So it's a good idea to buy an adapter for your Canon M50 and buy EF lenses. When you upgrade to Canon R, you can buy then an adapter for your Canon R camera and use those same EF lenses. And that's probably a good idea anyway, because the RF lenses are so expensive. And you can also buy other brands like Sigma, Tamron, whatever. But all those EF-M lenses are lost when you decide to upgrade and get rid of your Canon M50. Unless you keep it as a backup, of course. So there's nothing wrong with the EOS M system and the EF-M lens mount, but you have to be aware of it that it's a separate lens mount system. If you know for sure that at some point you'll want to upgrade, and I know it's a difficult question because a lot of you probably bought the Canon M50 because you like photography and filmmaking as a hobby, but then you get the hang of it and you're gonna want to upgrade. You never know, right? So either way, if it's just a hobby or you take it a little bit more serious, it's always a good idea to get an adapter for your Canon M50 and get some EF lenses. The range of EF-M lenses already is so small, so you'll add a ton of lens options for your Canon M50 that you'll also be able to use on the Canon R system. Just make sure to stick with EF lenses, full frame lenses, and not EF-S lenses. Those are crop sensor lenses. I'll link a few adapter options for the Canon M50 in the description. So don't worry about it, but realize that it's a separate camera system and a separate lens mount system, and Canon happens to be focusing more on the R system and not the M system. In a camera store, they probably won't tell you this, so keep it in mind. A second important limitation of the Canon M50 is the video files. And I'm not saying that the video files are bad or horrible or whatever. They're okay, but there are some issues with noise in the shadows if you're not careful, and the Canon M50 also doesn't support log. For beginners, it's not that much of a problem, and it also depends on what you're using the camera for. Log footage looks like poop straight out of camera, but it contains a lot more information than a standard profile, so you can color grade it however you want. You'll have to add contrast, saturation, and you can add your own style. You can do it manually, or you can use LUTs. You can't do that with one of the standard profiles of the Canon M50 because those profiles already give your footage a specific look. Now, if you're making vlogs or YouTube videos, then in most cases, you're probably gonna be okay with the standard profiles. But if you want to explore the world of cinematicness and color grading, you're gonna run into some problems. I've talked about the CineStyle profile. That's a flat picture profile you can install, and it kind of simulates log. So you'll get some more dynamic range, and you have to color grade it. And there are more flat profiles out there, just Google it. You can also try to make your own profile even. The thing is, even if you use one of those flat profiles on the Canon M50, it won't give you the same result as real log footage. It won't have all that information and dynamic range. And of course, it's also because of the sensor in the Canon M50 that's not on the same level as a more expensive camera. It's a budget camera, an entry-level camera, so that's just how it is. I knew this from the moment I bought my Canon M50, but recently I was color grading some footage from my Canon M50 next to footage from my R5, and the difference is huge. The M50 footage is missing a lot of information and color depth to work with. Here's the footage side by side to give you an idea. Both have a similar color grade applied. And then when you really look at the details, you'll see that the Canon M50 footage has more noise and less detail. And the more you work with it, the worse it gets, because the information is just not there. So Canon M50 video is not bad or horrible, but if you want to learn about color grading and you're really into it, then at some point you're gonna run into the limitations. And again, it all depends on what you want to use the footage for, because for a lot of things, it's great. So I still love my Canon M50, I think it's great, and I hope that the Mark II will be even better. But what I've talked about in this video, the EOS M system and EFM lens mount being like a separate system, and then the video files and the sensor not being on the same level as more expensive cameras, those are two things you should be aware of. Especially if at some point you want to upgrade to full frame. And that's all I wanted to say today. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.